Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I'm going to do something a little bit different in a lot of ways. I'm going to use my cell phone in worship, and I'm going to do this to time us so that we don't go too long. Okay, so that is why I'm doing it. All right, so here we go. Today it is the first Sunday of Lent, and we're doing something that I've developed over the years in my ministry called a sacred conversation. I've done a couple. You remember with Claudia Jones, back in June was the first one. And so for the whole season of Lent, we're going to do this. And the idea with a sacred conversation is that we're kind of taking an issue that really impacts our congregation and our world and bringing it really close through a dialogue. And so we're going to, and Hilary Carpenter I've invited to be part of today. We're calling it the Sacred Conversation, Visiting Prisoners, Finding Jesus. And so for this whole season, we're going to be doing some things that really get to the heart of justice issues and get us thinking. Lent is a time of self-reflection, and trying to think about changing our hearts, or what is God doing to work on us. And so these are going to be hard topics. There are not easy answers. So this is an invitation to a conversation. And so I've invited Hilary to help me do this. Okay, so Hilary, can you share a little bit about how you came to First Church?
Sure. I'm actually from Windsor and was baptized at Grace Church. My dad was a teacher at Loomis, so I grew up on the campus of Loomis, and I went to Windsor Public Schools and then was fortunate enough as a faculty brat to go to Loomis. Mm-hmm. And then after college, moved around a bit and met my husband and adopted my son, and we, to our great surprise, ended up coming right back to where I started, which is here. My son was baptized in this church. Mm-hmm. And I've been working as a public defender for 10 years now in Hartford and in Rocky Hill.
Great. So some of us might have an idea of what a public defender is, maybe from TV. I'm a Law and Order fan. But can you just share a little bit for real what it is like to do the work that you do as a public defender in Hartford?
Well, what you see on TV is a really good example of what we don't do. So that should be your starting point. I've actually had two jobs as a public defender that were very different. In the first 7 years, I worked for what was called the habeas unit. It's now known as the Innocence Project. And I worked with people who had already been convicted of crimes and had exhausted all their appeals. And they had this one last remedy, if you will, to fight their convictions. And it's called the habeas process. And a typical day there was spent mostly at the office, in front of my computer. Very rarely did I go to court. And when I had to meet with my clients, I had to go to prison. So that's where I had my meetings with my clients. I've been to pretty much every facility in the state. But now I rarely go to prison because I don't have any time in my new job. I work in the Hartford Superior Court, where the typical day is you hit the ground running, you're in front of a judge all day, you are meeting with clients who are either out or they're incarcerated and they're down in lockup, and it's a very, very fast-paced job that I'm involved in right now, so very different.
Right. And you've also did some work sort of in your spare time with the death penalty project. Do you want to share a little bit about that as well?
I'm very, very honored to have been part of that movement. When I moved back here in May of 2005, Connecticut was getting ready to carry out its first execution in about 40 years, I think. And I was just shocked that this was happening and was lucky enough to find this small group of people who were organizing this sort of fledgling effort to abolish the death penalty in Connecticut. And long story short, over the years, we grew and grew and grew and grew and became a full-fledged organization. And I'm happy to say that a couple of months ago, we completely closed up shop because we're finished.
Great. So one of the words that we use to talk about to Jesus is the advocate, right? Because Jesus advocates or stands up for us. and even when we can't do it ourselves. And so another name for a lawyer is an advocate. So it seems like maybe the kind of lawyering that you do is advocating, standing up for people who are vulnerable. And so when you do this work, there is kind of a personal component. I get the sense that it's something that you believe in. It's not just punching a clock and getting a certain job done. So can you talk a bit about the personal component and how your faith motivates you to do the work that you do?
Well, my faith has definitely informed my work. When I applied to law school, I really did so with the intention of becoming a public defender. I wanted to represent indigent clients, people that were marginalized in our society. And I tried to keep an open mind when I was in law school and, learn other things and keep my mind open to those things. But I ended up exactly where I intended to be all along. And I feel very fortunate to do the work that I do. I've always loved the idea of Jesus befriending those that society tends to hate or marginalize. And I find that part of him very provocative and challenging to all of us. So following his example in advocating for those that we as a society tend to push to the sidelines, in the case of prisoners, literally shutting them away, is why I became a public defender.
Wow. So the scriptures that I chose today kind of fit with that Jesus that you're talking about. The first one is from the prophet Ezekiel, and it's this image of God as a shepherd. And Ezekiel says, I will seek the lost, and I will bring back the strayed, and I will bind up the injured, and I will strengthen the weak, and I will feed them with justice. And I think that this is kind of when Jesus came along, he knew about this image of God as a shepherd. And I think that's kind of partly how Jesus became who he is that he saw himself as a shepherd. And it's more than just the tending of the sheep, because Jesus goes further. He is saying it's not enough to care for people when it's easy, right? Jesus wants us to care for the least of these, the ones who are sometimes hard to help, hard to love even. And in Matthew, we kind of get that story, that pushback. The disciples are asking Jesus, of course, we welcome you, we love you, Jesus, we would do anything. And Jesus really pushes back, and it says, when the disciples asked, when was it that we didn't feed you or clothe the naked or visit the prisoners? And Jesus said, truly I tell you, just as you did it or did not do it to the least of these, you did it to me. And he extends this idea of caretaking and sees himself in the least of these, including prisoners. And it seems to me in my church work that we as a congregation, or many churches, we find it a lot easier to feed and clothe and visit the sick than we do to visit prisoners. Like, that is the hard one that we have to do. So why do you think that is? Like, why is that the thing that we get stuck on?
It's true. I've actually heard that passage from Matthew and references to it, where they even leave off the part about I was in prison and you visited me. And that always was very sad to me, because that's my favorite part of that passage. The problem, I think, is that people don't know how to visit prisoners, what that means. You can't just get in your car and drive up to Summers and go up to the front desk at Osborne Correctional Institution and say, hi, I'm here to visit some prisoners. That's not the way it works. Plus, prison is a very scary place, and it's a very sad place. And fortunately for most people, it's a wholly unfamiliar place. But it can be a place of tremendous grace. And I just want to tell a brief story to kind of illustrate that. I ran into a friend of mine recently who is a teacher. She's been an educator for a really long time, and she's seen it all. She's not very easily impressed or moved by much, and she's a real tough cookie. And she came up to me, and she had this look in her eyes that I'd never seen before. And she had just finished teaching a sociology class to a group of prisoners in a medium to maximum security prison here. And she was utterly transformed by this experience because she, as a teacher, was watching these adult students make connections between what she was teaching them, which was sociology, and their own lives. And making that connection profoundly changed them. And as a teacher, I don't know if there are any teachers here today, but you know that's kind of a fantasy of teachers, that their students will make those connections in their own personal lives between what you're teaching them and who they are as people. And she was so moved by that experience that she just couldn't wait to talk to me about it. And this is not someone who's usually, easily overwhelmed or impressed by anything, and she just couldn't wait to get back there and start teaching them again. So that is one of the examples of how prison can just be a place where the most unexpected moments of grace can come out at you from such a terrible place.
Yeah. So when in preparation for this, we were talking about, many of you know I served in an urban church for many years, and so I saw, so in our congregation there were a number of people who had been in prison and were in the congregation, and it impacted us profoundly in a lot of ways. The family structure was constantly in turmoil, but also when we wanted to have programs for youth and children, trying to find male chaperones and people that could participate as fathers because they had criminal records. It was very hard to find, and that certain communities are so profoundly impacted that by the justice system, and it really impacted us. And it made me think about how congregations like us could help other congregations that are more impacted than we are. And also, I part of my work in Providence, Rhode Island, is I was part of a Leadership Rhode Island program, and we spent a day visiting prisons. And it was scary. Like I can attest to, it was a little bit scary. You didn't know what to expect. There are background checks and searches and all of those kinds of things that once you know about it, it's not so bad. But I have to say, like when you see a human being living in a cage, and there's something that comes over you that it just isn't right for people to live like this, and you want to reach out and sort of how can you be a human, loving, compassionate connection. And so it changes us when we visit, I feel like. It's not just about helping, but it's also getting in touch with our own sense of compassion, of how we treat other human beings, and what is help. And so I just really thank you for bringing that to us. So I know you have a lot of work that you do, and you're going to, for a second hour, Hilary is going to talk to us more. But do you have any ideas about how this church or any church could be more connected to this Jesus' ministry of visiting prisoners? Like what might be some first steps? Like teaching a class, that sounds like way down the road. Like what would just some like one step might be, or a few?
Well, there's lots and lots of ways, and I will at coffee hour share some of the organizations that are working with prisoners and also with people who have recently been released from prison. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we have to remember is somebody doesn't stop becoming a prisoner when they walk out the gates of a prison that they've been at. That follows them for a very long time. It has long-lasting consequences in their lives. So there's lots of ways that you can be involved in an organization that works with people that have been in prison or are in prison, works with the families, the children of prisoners. When I was doing a lot of client visits at McDougall prison in Suffield, for example, I would run into this woman every time I was there who was a literacy volunteer. And she was working with a rather famous inmate there who happened to have a developmental disability. And she went in every week with him and read and taught him to read. And there's other ways that you can visit with prisoners without actually even going to jails. You can help with the children of prisoners by tutoring or mentoring. It helps really to think outside the box when you're thinking about this. For example, if you're connected to the schools in your neighborhood,
right.
What are they doing are they doing anything to assist students whose parents are incarcerated? That's something that is a very right. Valuable thing to know. I'll make a little plug for the public defenders. We're always looking for clothing for our clients. We have clients that go to trial. They don't have clothes to go to trial in. Right now we have a huge need for winter coats because we have people that are getting released from jail right there at the courthouse because their public defenders did such a great job with them. And they don't have anything to wear, and it's 20 degrees outside. So that's also something that is a way that you can visit with prisoners and be reaching out to these people that are really so marginalized in our society. So I have lots of ideas, and I have a handout, so come and see me at coffee hour.
So what I hear you saying is that you're agreeing, and I think we can all agree, this is something that a lot of us may be not super comfortable with, this idea of visiting prisoners or going to a jail, or what would that be like? And what you're saying is that if you step out of your comfort zone for a moment, that there really is a lot of to gain, and the sense of being able to help, and like I said, this well of compassion that you didn't know you had, and love. Is that what you would, what do you feel like you have gotten out of it?
I feel like what I've gotten out of it is a deeper understanding of the humanity of people. If we have time, I'm just going to share a note that I received. When I was working in habeas work, like I told you before, with prisoners who had already been convicted, habeas work is like the equivalent of a Hail Mary in football to win a habeas case. It just never happens. You try and you try and you try, and you feel like Sisyphus pushing up a rock. And I had a client, and I won't tell you the details of his case, but suffice to say that I had a very strong feeling that he was wrongfully convicted and was serving a very long prison sentence for something that he didn't do. And I was not able to help him. It was very heartbreaking to me. But I was able to help somebody that he was in the same facility with, and was able to get results for him. And that was such a great thing. And I got a letter from this first client of mine after he'd heard the news. And this is what he said. I'll read just part of it. He said, "It is nice to hear that people actually get relief from the courts. I'm so happy for you. Your job reminds me of a story I read about September 11. After the towers fell, there was a massive search for any survivors. To help, the searchers brought in dogs that are trained to find hidden people. The dogs did a wonderful job and found person after person, but they were dead. The dogs actually got depressed and stopped working efficiently, and some even stopped looking altogether. To combat the problem, the handlers set up a controlled search where they would have a live person hidden, so the dogs would search and find someone alive. Finding that one person alive kept the dogs going, and they got the motivation back. I hope that win does the same for you. Here's to finding one alive." And I read that letter a million times, and it still always makes me well up. That is the kind of moment of grace that you get when you work with people that are incarcerated. Those are the kinds of things that happen.
Well, I don't think we could end it better than that, but I just want to thank you so much for this, our very first Lenten sacred conversation, and I appreciate so much that you could do this.
Thank you.
Let's give her